there anyone who would like to go first? If not, I'm going to go ahead and go first and share my feedback. So, as the AppTel task, I think a lot of people found very complicated, and I think a lot of us were kind of under the impression that the AppTel required an annotated bibliography. It did not. And so what Dr. Stedman did was he sent out an email to clarify that a literature review did not have to have a annotated bibliography, but you could do an annotated bibliography in the place of the literature review if you included a certain number of sources per topic in task one. So I wanted to make that clear because I think it was a point of frustration for him. It was evident because he sent out the email saying it, and then he sent out the email reiterating it again. So I just wanted everyone to know that it was fine if you chose to do that, but in a way, it was more work
Mm-hmm.
because you had to do basically a partial literature review and then
Mm-hmm.
the annotated bibliography. So I had the pleasure
I'm
of
sorry.
submitting.
I don't. Did he say in a placement or did he say in addition to? 'Cause I thought he said in addition to.
He said you could do in addition to, but if you had really done a complete literature review, I don't think you would have wanted to do the annotated bibliography. So,
Yeah.
but since you said that, let me go ahead and read the email. And it says, I'm forwarding this email after hearing from several students over the past 2 decades. Please be reminded that in prompt one of task one of the AppTel, you are to address each of the 5 areas with a minimum of 3 references for each. Many students have asked about an annotated bibliography. This is not required for the task, but is acceptable in addition to the 15 references if that is something you want to include. Also, be reminded that prompt two requires 2 different checklists. You are showing us in task one what you will actually use in task two. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's addition to. He still wants to see a literature view, and if you want to add the bibliography, then you can. But I don't see it as a replacement though, and I'm just saying that based off on when it goes to task screen because he's not grading it on task screen. They're based it off the rubric, and I
I
just don't
think
want to
he,
lose
I
points.
said it, he is a grader in task stream, I thought.
No, when you submit it to task stream, these are random people that are grading, and they're grading it based off of the rubric. That's how he explained it in one of the classes.
Okay, because he said that he would see some of them, just not all of them. He said that I think in our second class. But but that's an excellent point. So let's go ahead and jump into these peer reviews for the first task. I had the
Okay.
privilege of reading Frida's work and Home's work. I'm going to go ahead and start off with um, with Frida. So I did say the task was aligned to the course content and that you did use your external sources appropriately. I think you did a lot of different sources that focused on teacher efficacy, and you also included the photos of the walkthrough form used at Bonner. I thought the strength of your work was that you did an excellent job summarizing the research and categorizing it according to the task category. The weakness, candidates walkthrough instrument is in use at her school, but it does not seem to clearly reflect effective research-based practices such as Marzano, Costa Star, etc. And I don't know if you're going to be using that specific walkthrough form or is that just the form that's specific to Bonner since you're in a different setting. Leadership, the narrative does demonstrate leadership. It includes a detailed classroom walkthrough form and the teacher working conditions survey. Grammar and mechanics. The narrative does utilize formal language. And, I think once you read through and correct the grammatical errors, run on sentences, that it'll read well. And then, of course, the organization. I thought your evidence was very easy to locate. You, you stuck to the template structure, and everything was very clear. You do use APA formatting, but it is with errors and you do not maintain the suggested spacing during your annotated bibliography section. Also, I noticed that there was some shading issues going on, and the spacing is inconsistent in the reference section. So all just minor edits before you submit your final piece.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have any questions before I moved on to Halima's peer evaluation?
No, but just to piggyback on that and walkthrough, we are just starting. Like you said, my setting is a little different, so we are just actually trying to catch up to community schools. So she's actually taking everything I'm doing now and applying it directly to everything we need to develop and create for our programs. So that's actually my project right now, to develop a more research based walkthrough and the checklist for the school, because it is pretty generic. So, but yeah, we're at the beginning stages.
Okay. And see, and that's something you can always work on and then use through your walkthroughs for task two.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Halima.
Okay.
So I wanted to applaud you for being the first person to post. It's been a very trying week, but I was like, Halima is on with these deadlines. She is doing it big. Um, I
It's
did
getting
say that
hard.
you source content and that you did use your external sources appropriately. I think you included several sources that focus on teacher efficacy, which was really good. You did an excellent job of including extensive observation instrument that includes several elements from the North Carolina teacher evaluation system. I thought that was nice, and the formative schools project since has been dismantled. And then, of course, the rubric weakness. Even though the walkthrough instrument was expensive and included categories that the observation will possibly be an entire 90-minute block, the question I had was walkthroughs are typically 15 to 25 minutes long, while even in North Carolina only requires an evaluation to be a minimum of 45 minutes. So I wanted to know if I thought that was a weakness because I didn't know if you were going to tailor it, or if you were actually going to be able to spend 90 minutes in someone's class. Leadership, the narrative demonstrates leadership. It includes a detailed classroom walkthrough form and checklist. It does utilize formal language, and once minor grammatical errors are corrected, the task will flow. Organization, the evidence narrative closely follows the template structure, and the evidence presented is easy to locate. APA formatting is used with errors, and all citations should occur before punctuation.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have any questions?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I
So
was a
I'm
little
gonna.
confused about the checklist. I thought we were supposed to take like everything that we learned from the literature review and create like a checklist for it. So that's why that first one was pretty long. But I did have another one that was in there that was kind of short that I feel like I could get in, in at least 15, 20 minutes.
I think it's. I don't think it's anything wrong with it. It was expensive. If you want to boil it down for you, I just got the impression. The idea is that whatever we use for this task that we created or use put out for this task, we'll also use for tail task too.
Yeah. And I've done it a few walkthroughs already with this checklist and it's worked pretty well. Like the second one. The first one is too long. I haven't tried to use that one. It's the second one that I'm using.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this over to Christy. Christy, you've been muted. Is something going on?
No, I'm sorry. I'm here. I want to go ahead and preface my feedback with the fact that I'm glad that you clarified the about the annotated bibliography because I was confused about that. And so my feedback is going to be not as relevant because I had the confusion there. So I'll go ahead and start with Frida. I put that the task content is aligned with the course content. A strength is the description of the school and community. The candidate describes the structure of the programs in great detail, which in turn gives a foundational view of the background of the school, and I found that very interesting there at the beginning. Another area of strength is the inclusion of the current school's checklist in Figure 1. Then for the area of weakness, this is where I had put that while there's a labeled literature review, which was very clear there, so now I understand that that was fine. I had put that there was an area of weakness with the lack of a bibliography, and that's where my confusion came in. So that may not be as relevant there. Another area of weakness is the lack of description of the checklist the candidate supplied. So I found a little bit, I saw the checklist in figure 1, but then I was a little confused in, like, how did the checklist come about? Where did it come from? Did you develop it yourself? So I was kind of looking for a description there. I put for leadership, I put that there was no leadership demonstrated because I was looking for the activity that you had participated in. And I don't know if that's another misunderstanding on my part as what we were looking for, because I was looking for the development of that. So I'm not sure if that's relative. The evidence narrative is written professionally in formal language. Some areas of the text have gray coloring, which I know that Tamara had already mentioned that. And the evidence narrative is structured in a logical manner. The candidate is missing some bibliography information, which is, we've already discussed that not being relevant. And the in-text citation is properly cited. So did that make sense, Frida? That
It did. And about the checklist, I wasn't sure because I've actually used that checklist, and like I said, we're at the beginning stages. So
yes,
when I compared it to what, other things that were coming up as I was trying to prepare to complete the task, it wasn't enough. And I had some that were completed, so I wasn't sure we were just supposed to give an example of what we used, or if we were supposed to do one that we actually did. I started this like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
yeah.
And so I wasn't quite sure, so I just kind of did use the template, and I gave it a little preference, but yeah, it wasn't detailed effort. So it narrative, so it makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well, Tamara, I also did yours. Same thing. I had the task content is aligned with course content. A strength is a description of the school and community. The candidate describes the community in great detail, which in turn gives a foundational view of the background, which I found very interesting to learn about the community around which your school is. I thought that was interesting. An area of weakness there again, I had put identifying the literature review and bibliography, which is not relevant. Another area of weakness is the lack of the checklist the candidate used in the appendix. While the candidate did include questions, they did not include the checklist they created for the staff. And so that's where I don't know if I was confused in what I was seeing, because I did see your list of questions there. And so I didn't know about that. And again, I also put there, there's no leadership demonstrated, because I was looking for the description of your activities in developing it, a PLC meeting or something of that nature that you had, and that may have been my misunderstanding as well. The evidence narrative is written professionally in formal language. The evidence narrative is structured in a logical manner. And then again, the literature review, which is not relevant. So, and so I don't know how much of that was my misunderstanding and fog from my surgery and how much of it is relevant. So I apologize for that.
Oh, no problem, because I was editing it about an hour ago. I'm going to try and finish my edit, just for readability before I submit it. It was really hard this week just doing kind of anything. So, yeah, that's definitely helpful. Thank you so much, Christy.
Okay.
Halima?
Yes. So were we still doing the same two?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Because I just did all 3 because I didn't know if we had changed or not. So my 2 were Frida and Christy. And I'm going to start with Frida. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, Frida, yes, the task content is aligned with the course content. The author did a great job of staying on topic and supporting her checklist with the evidence from the literature review. As a strength is the background information section of the paper. Candidate described the section well and helped set up a visual of Bonnie Springer School. The area of weakness is the literature review. The candidate, you started off as a literature review format, and then you switched over to the annotated bibliography format in the middle. So I was just a little confused about that part. And again, as Tamara had mentioned, that you didn't need the antibiotic but you could have used it as an additional. And I was afraid that you didn't have all the sources you needed in the literature review, which was supposed to be 3 per topic. Leadership is demonstrated because the candidate researched best practices and you presented the checklist that represents them. The evidence is written professionally and somewhat follows the rubric. There are some grammar mistakes, such as spacing and run-on sentences, and some of your paragraphs could be split into 2 to help with the flow of the paper. The evidence narrative is mostly structured in a professional manner. Headings and subheadings are clearly presented, and evidence is easy to locate. I just suggested that maybe you could type up your checklist instead of a picture of it because the picture is kind of hard to see. And the structure of the narrative mostly follows the guidelines of the template that has been provided. The format flows in this APA format and often cited evidence correctly. That's Frida. Do you have any questions, Frida, or comment? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Christy. Christy, yes, the task content is aligned with the course content. You did a great job of staying on topic and supporting your checklist with the evidence from the annotated bibliography. Areas of strength is the background information section of the paper. You did a great job describing your school at Shelby Middle School. The area of weakness is the literature review. You created an annotated bibliography instead, and also each category was not supported with 3 different sources. Leadership is demonstrated because you did create the checklist and it did represent what you did have from your annotated bibliography. The evidence narrative is mostly structured in a professional manner. Headings and subheadings are clearly presented and evidence is easy to locate. Again, maybe you as well could type up your checklist instead of sending a picture of it because it's a little hard to see as well. The structure of the narrative mostly follows the guidelines of the template that was provided. The format follows APA format and often cited evidence correctly. Did you have any questions on that, Christy?
No, but thank you for reiterating that 3 per topic for the literature review, because I kept scouring everything looking for that, and somehow I never found it. And so I was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to have here. So I just went with what I could find. So I know now I need to go back and do that.
Yeah. And Tamara, I did one for you as well. I'm not going to go through each one, but I do want to say that you did an awesome job. I think only thing I could find wrong with yours was your citation, and it's just not consistent all the way through. I think for one example, you had a page number listed at the end, and I think you only should include page numbers when it's a direct quote.
Well, I'm definitely gonna go back and look at it. To be honest, I really struggled this week. I was kind of recovering from the flu.
Yeah, I hope you're feeling better. But other than that, it looked really good. You did. I feel like you followed everything, and everything was in there from the literature review to all your sources you needed for each topic. So it looked really good.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that because I was struggling.
Okay.
Really struggling. Frida,
Yes. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
that's
I'm
fine.
fighting the cooties. I'm fighting hard. I'm trying not to go down. So I did Christy and Halima. And I was hesitant about doing some reviews because, like everybody else, I struggled really understanding exactly what the expectation was and what we're supposed to have where. But for Miss Christie, which I hope you're feeling well, the content is aligned and appropriate, and external sources are evident. For the strengths, I think your checklist was a strength, specifically because you related it back to the needs of your academic setting, and it was relevant and purposeful for your setting. It wasn't just one that you created just so you could get the assignment done. The absence of the checklist for you had mentioned something about the best practices from for teacher empowerment, developed by Todd Whitaker, and then there was a walkthrough, and I didn't see those. You mentioned them, but I didn't see those presented in the paper. And then again, as Halima mentioned, we were supposed to have 3 sources to support each area, and you only have 1, but you explained that, of course. And evidence of leadership. Developing that practical and relevant checklist was definitely evidence of leadership. You getting together with your team to develop that and govern the professional expectations in your setting. The narrative is professionally written, and I always put a general statement about the general precautions to just encourage candidates to review the narrative to ensure about spelling and grammar, and about the logical. It's well written and logical, organized, but just a general precaution to review it just to make sure that the citations and everything are as they should be, because we always find something when we review. And for Miss Halima, the candidate did develop a literature review with a bibliography that is in line with the best practices areas identified in the prompt. The checklist directly reflects the areas emphasized in the task 1, and it exhibited the relationship between the research best practices and the actual practice in your school setting. And I saw that you included the checklist for North Carolina in there as well. I thought that was a nice tie-in. No narrative. Oh, so I had a question, and I was hesitant. This is one of the main areas I was hesitant about, because it was like for your checklist, there's not necessarily a narrative or information relating the checklist back to the limitation in the setting, like the paragraph to describe what it was, I believe. But then I was in my head, I was like, I don't know if that was a requirement. If that makes sense?
Yes, but it's something I can probably add.
Okay, and then I'm sorry.
I said it's probably something it doesn't hurt to add it. So thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, and the narrative is proficiently written. Candidates encouraged to review the narrative to ensure about spelling and grammar. It's logical and well organized, but again, candidates encouraged to review just to make sure things are as they should be, and as well as the citations, just to check to make sure that commas, periods, dates, page marks, all that is as it should be. So that was all I had.
Thank you.
But it was interesting reading everyone's work.
Thank you, Frida.
So okay, so I had I believe, was it Halima mentioned about how I started out as a literature review and then I went to an annotated bibliography, and I'm concerned now because like what she mentioned about who's going to grade this. Does it have to be one or the other? Because to me, when I read the directions, like you all said, he said it would be acceptable. That's why at first I started off with the literature review, and I was like, well, wait, if I can do an annotated bibliography, I kind of switched. So do you think that I should go back and just make it all? Did that make sense?
Again, in his setting, in his little last video, I don't know if you guys got the email where he sent that they had a problem where another student had put something in the paper in a different location, and they asked for that student to correct it. He said that the graders are just have the rubric right beside them, and they're looking for it. And he said that's why we have the template set up the way we do and ask you guys to follow it, because they're looking for it beside, they have the rubric and they're looking for it in your paper. And if they don't see it, then you don't get the points for it. So that's the only thing. I'm just afraid that if it's not Dr. Lamb or, who's grading your paper in the task screen and they don't see the literature review, which I was trying to get through to the rubric, that they won't give you the points for it. That's all I'm afraid for. I mean, Dr. Lamb just says excellent, move on, but if he's not grading it in the task screen, then
Well, that's why I'm confused because he said that it would be acceptable if either one would be acceptable.
Well,
So,
When did he say acceptable? Because in the email that she just read, he said it can be an addition to.
Yeah, he said in addition to. And he
well,
still,
and
he's like many students have asked about an annotated bibliography. That is not required for the task, but is acceptable in addition to the 15 references if that is something you want to include. What I try to do for clarification is after I look at the template, I actually look at the rubric
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
because without that, I don't necessarily know what should be included for each category, but I do feel like that helps me kind of guide the work more and more, particularly, when I'm working on these drafts. Like, for instance, had I not had I not looked at the rubric, I wouldn't have known how many sources were required or for each topic. So that really helped kind of guide those decisions as opposed to, me finishing and then seeing the email. Also, I don't know if you all know this, but we're enrolled in two classes. One is for the internship, one is for this. The internship, all of us, because we're in the same class, our internship advisor is actually Dr. Stedman. So if you're ever looking for, I think, some additional feedback, you can email him and he will email you back.
yeah.
And I think that's really great too, because you're actually supposed to be submitting your finished product into that other class for a grade as well.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
so
I think I'm gonna go back and look at the rubric too and kind of
yeah,
Well,
compare. That's a good suggestion.
when you look at the rubric, it says the candidate will conduct a literature review with bibliography reflecting various teacher empowerment and leadership best practices, and then it has the areas to be addressed.
Hmm. And see, I did both, and there was no mention of no. You need to correct this. It was just it was excellent. Move on.
well, I think the
So
difference is that there's a bibliography, which I think in this case is the reference section,
Mm-hmm.
annotated bibliography, which is completely different.
Yeah.
mhm.
And that's just something that I think we're expected to know.
Yeah.
I perhaps maybe in the future, before we do these assignments, we need to actually have a Zoom conference to talk about how we each read the requirements. I'm sorry, each read the requirements for the task because those actually change drastically, I think, depending on who's reading it and how it's interpreted.
And also, Frida, you do have a literature review, but your literature review don't include all of the categories. That's
Yeah.
what I'm afraid of. That if they're checking, they see your literature review, but they don't see that you have all the categories in your literature review, that you might lose points there.
Okay. Well,
Mm.
I'm gonna go back and I'll go back and look at it.
Ladies, we have 6 minutes left for the meeting time. Do we need to hop off and then hop back on to do the next section for the case study?
Oh, we can. I don't know if have you all done the case study?
I
Mm.
have not. Is it due this?
Not due yet. It's not
Oh,
due yet.
okay. All right.
I have submitted mine, but if you want to wait to do the case study next week, we can
Okay.
to do those two Zoom sessions. But since we've already completed the task, is there anything else that anyone has for the good of the group?
Mm-mm.
Hearts and minds clear?
Well, I wanted to ask right quick about you are putting in artifacts into stream. Are you putting in how? I guess I'm a little confused about. Have you submitted additional things into task stream other than the first the axle?
I
I've
have
not.
not. What I did was I've been working on my internship log to keep up with all my hours because he said he wanted them. It was a minimum of 80 per semester. So I knew I was going to go over the 80, but I wanted to make sure that they were distributed along categories. So as I've included them, what I've done is I've created a folder with meeting agendas and stuff like that to upload into TaskStream.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually going to do that, to be honest with you, over Thanksgiving break because I haven't been able to have a lot of time. You know, it's like a week and a half, but this is really going. This semester ends, I think, December 14th, and they ask that we have everything in. But I think by like December 10th. So my goal was just to kind of get it all together and organize it for those purposes
Mm-hmm.
because one thing that has really helped me with that is that my district has an initiative with the Wallace Foundation for Instructional Leadership. So it's called the Hertford, and your district may have something similar. It's called the Hertford Institute for Prospective Principals. And so we collaborate with other districts and talk about issues that principals face and things that, and kind of fill in a typical leadership gap. Um, and one thing, our last session, which was Tuesday of last week, our superintendent actually did our PD, and it was only about 4 or 5 of us, and he did scenarios on anywhere from instructional support to action plans to supporting teachers, and we had some really strong conversations. And we were also enlisted in another book study. And basically, so you can always use things like that of that nature. So